to the Moodle course for the next couple weeks, and likely we'll continue to be making changes throughout the semester. And so I will be updating the course outline because I've been able to work through half the semester, but I do want to finalize some of those changes. More specifically, next week, as you guys are looking, I did want to alert you guys to a few things here. So let me go ahead and go through that. So you notice here, we're over here at week 3 already in February. It feels like things are going so quick. You'll see some of the readings there. Week 4, you notice here worksheet number 4 and your Genesis survey. So when you go ahead and click on your Genesis survey, you'll find that it's here. But do note that what you're going to be filling in on the Genesis survey are the chapters which were assigned. And so I so wonderfully and graciously, in my compassion and utter uh, kindness, what I decided to go through is I help create the template for you guys so you guys can see that there. That is just, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll notice there's skip some chapters. Why? Because the fact that you guys didn't have to read those chapters, and so you're just filling in the chapters that you'll have done for that. And so again, brief title, and then some of the ideas. You'll comment about themes, characters, significant narratives, identify their significance, history, character of God, any questions. The questions are optional. So again, you don't have to include all these different things, but again, these are just giving you ideas about what to focus on when you're filling in the key ideas here. And so again, you don't have to fill in all these things. You just have to fill in. Again, these are just more guidelines, to quote Barbosa from Pirates. So again, that's available for you guys there. And some of you might ask, well, Partita, thank you for all that kindness that you show to us, but there's still a bunch of other stuff that we have going on to do. And I completely understand that. And so, which is why, again, if you're needing some extra time for assignments, please reach out and let me know. Again, I understand with the semester just kind of getting going. I know we're at the 3rd week, but for some of us, it feels like the 15th already. Please reach out and let me know. Again, if you're needing some extra time, it's absolutely fine. Again, with several things going on, which some of you brought up with prayer requests, that things happen and life happens, and that's why grace exists. And so, again, communicate with me if you're needing some extra time on some things to work on it, or again, if it just seems like, yeah, I just have no brain power right now. Talk to me and we'll work something out. I do. Again, my concern really is for your learning, not so much just for you to get all the work done and you just kind of mindlessly go um, about doing the work and just kind of trudging along, but you absolutely forget everything you have studied and worked on. So you guys are paying too much money to do that. And so that being said, again, reach out to me. We'll work something out. We'll figure it out, and we'll get through this together to make sure not only you're learning the best you can, but you're able to perform to the best of your abilities, given the circumstances that we're all in right now. So one more thing is that on the course, I forgot to point this out last time, is you'll notice here at the course information, I threw in the survey templates over here. I figured because some of the weeks are closed off, and especially if you're wanting to work ahead, like Exodus is coming up here in 2 or 3 weeks. So you'll go here to survey templates and you'll notice Deuteronomy, Exodus, Genesis, Numbers. They're all here. If you're wanting to, as you read, it'll take you a little bit longer, but hey, it'll be worth the work because you won't have to do as much in the end of trying to remember and go back over the reading. So as you're reading through, I don't know if you guys remember as elementary school kids, I don't know if you guys had to do this. I remember I had to do this where there's like a specific number of pages or books you had to read during the week, and you have to do like a short summary of each book that you had read or the number of pages. So just consider it something like that. That as you're going reading through the specific chunks of reading, just go ahead and fill in, because again, it'll be much easier to take the half hour or an hour than it is to try to re-rehearse everything with right before the assignment is due. Was that make sense? Sweet. And again, you'll find it here under the course resources. So yeah, week 4 is up, week 5 is up, and you'll see that here. I did I did, why am I forgetting the word? Edit some of the readings so that way it's not so heavy during the week. Again, realizing that, yeah, we needed to make some adjustments here early on. And so, again, you'll notice some of the difference, and I'll reflect that back in the course outline, but it is very likely that I'll trim back some of the readings here. So again, so you'll be going through Covenant only sections 1 and 2 for next week. You'll notice worksheet number 4. It's not overly difficult. I trimmed it way back in the Genesis survey again. If you've been writing things down, then it shouldn't be overly difficult either. Are there any questions, comments, concerns?
So you put the chapters that we're supposed to read for that on the course information?
Yeah. So you'll notice here, as you're going through the weeks, if you're wondering like, okay, well, what's you want for the survey? Genesis 1 through 4 will be on there. Genesis 6 through 11, 12 through 15, and 22. These are the only ones you're having to do the survey for. Because as you'll notice, when you go to the survey, let me pull this up so you guys can see. That's exactly what shows up here between the two. Let me do this actually, so you guys can kind of see the two. Let me pull this to the side over here. You should be able, well, now that's all the way to that side. This will work. All right, you'll notice, so Genesis 6 through 11, 6 through 11, 12 to 15, 12 to 15, but then it jumps from 16 all the way to 21. Why? Because you didn't need to read those. And so again, it's only for the chapters that you were assigned to read. And so there's much less that you're having to read. It's not just the whole book of Genesis, but very specific chapters that you'll be doing. You'll be pulling, again, key themes, characters, significant events, significant plot turns, and those kinds of things that develop. Let's see. Did you say when these are due? Yeah, next week. How long should the assignment take? Again, it just depends. If you've been putting off the Genesis readings, this may take some time. If you've kind of been working through it and taking some notes, then it shouldn't take very long. It really takes probably about as long as it takes you to read. So it's about 30 pages in an hour, probably a couple hours at the most. At the most. Because again, I don't know, there's not even 30 chapters here to have to read through. There's 9, 30, 34. It's about 25 chapters here. So just to read by itself will take about less than an hour. And some of these read really quickly. And so given that we had gone through some of the chapters last week or last class, and we'll be going through some more today, you'll be able to fill in that much more as you go through the class for next week. And so again, if you're needing some extra help or anything, please let me know. But again, a lot of it is just filling in what you're reading, and part of holding us accountable to make sure we're going through the reading. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? All right. Now that we're all a little more stressed out here at 9:20 in the morning. But again, you have time. You have time. So don't freak out. And I promise it looks much worse than it really is. And so promise you guys. And if it's as bad, you let me know, and then we'll figure something out. Partita's not a man that he should lie. So, all right. Let's go ahead, go through this lecture for this morning then. You'll see it there on week 3 at the bottom of the page on Moodle. What we're going to be going through today is understanding Genesis 3 through 6. We hadn't gone through all of it last class, and so we're going to finish that up here this morning. And then we'll talk about the flood in its context, in its ancient Near Eastern context, because it's going to be important for us to identify and to recognize what are some of the differences in the flood narrative as it pertains to its ancient Near Eastern context. Those of you that have taken cultures or are taking cultures, you guys will talk about how the flood story in Genesis isn't the only flood story in the ancient Near East. And so we'll talk about some of the key differences and what the Bible is trying to communicate, specifically in Genesis 6, about not just about the flood, but about the nature of God, the nature of humanity, and those kinds of things. And so what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and get into groups here for a few minutes. And then what I want you guys to do in groups is to work through these passages. I'll go ahead and go through the different groups and assign passages for you guys. But either take a screenshot, have Moodle open, do what you got to do. Either take a picture with your phone so you see these questions in front of you, because again, you'll only have to work on one of these, and I'll go through the groups and let you guys know, hey, you guys are working on this this question, you guys are working on this question, you guys are working on this question. And actually, let me do this real quick. And so I forgot to do this last time too. So it's question number 1. This is question number 2. Oh, this is question number 3. And so again, that being said, we'll go ahead, get into groups, and then I'll go through each room and let you guys know which question you guys are working on. So again, you go ahead and look through the questions and see what's going on. But again, and I'll give you guys enough time to work on these questions. So don't worry too much about whether or not you'll have enough time. You guys will have enough time to work on the questions. So, all right, let's go ahead. That's a big group. Let me see. So, okay. Hey, everybody. You guys are question number 1. Question number 1. So those of you that were in group 1 or had question number 1, let me go ahead and pull this up. Those of you that had question number 1, who are some of the characters in Genesis 3?
We talked about the serpent, Adam and Eve, and then I guess God, but he's like an overarching theme and character throughout the whole of it.
Yep.
Yeah, they're the main 3.
Yeah. Who else is in there though? There's one more.
Serpent.
There you go, the serpent.
That's what I don't know why I didn't say it, but like the serpent, yeah.
Yeah, a little sneaky snake running around. There you go, running around talking, chopping it up with everybody. All right, but what is being offered to Eve? Good, you guys got the characters. What's being offered to Eve? There's a couple different answers for this one. What's being offered to Eve?
Well, the opportunity to have like all knowledge, and like kind of eating from that, eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge, and
knowledge of what? Some specifics.
Knowledge isn't knowledge of life.
No.
Power
of life. No. There's a tree of life. It's close by. Okay. It's right next to it.
Good and
Anybody?
evil. Oh, yeah.
There you go. Good and evil. There you go. Come on, let's help our boy out. Help Jake out. There you go. Good and evil. There you go, Ruth. Thank you for that. Good and evil. But what else is being offered to Eve? Because that's one part, the knowledge of good and evil, very important.
Is it eternal life?
Eternal life. That's a little bit later on in the verse, in chapter 3, near the end, and that's kind of why God kicks them out of the garden, so they don't eat from the tree of life. What else is being offered?
Wisdom.
Wisdom.
And to be like God.
There you go, Abby. Good. So there's this connection that I'm wanting you guys to see and to make, this connection between knowing good and evil and being like God. And so we have to ask, okay, well, what's the connection here between the two? Because you have this thing that you will have your eyes opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And so again, that there's something here going on that the serpent is offering to Eve and to Adam as well. Because again, is Eve the only one present? And you guys will notice from some of the language that if we pay too much attention, put too much stock in one, then we're going to miss the other because of what's going on there. And I'll talk about that when we get there. But what is the sin? What is the sin?
Disobeying God.
Disobeying God. Good. Good. Disobedience. And what are some of the consequences?
That women are gonna like suffer more when they give birth. The pain is increased.
Yeah, still true today. Very much so, even in developed countries. What else? There's a couple other things that happen.
The ground is cursed.
Ground is cursed. Yep, and that's going to make things difficult, especially for an agrarian agricultural society. Anybody who's grown up near, on, or around a farm, you guys will know the earth ain't good. It's going to be very, very difficult. Very difficult. What else? There's a couple other things going on.
He curses the snakes.
Yep. Curse that snake. Rolling around on the ground, eating dirt all day. And then what happens to Adam? To the man?
He says that basically he will like eat the plants of the field, and like he has said something like, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread.
Nice. Exactly. By the sweat of your brow you will eat bread. And I'll talk about why that becomes a consequence, because you would think that it just means that he's working really hard, he's really sweaty and has to eat. You know, there's something else that's going on there that I'll talk about and I'll flesh out. So what's Yahweh's response after all that? Because the consequences are in part of the response, but what's happening at the end of chapter 3? What does God do at the end of chapter 3 there?
He like drove out man out of the Garden of Eden.
Yep. He does that to the man and to the woman. What does he do right before that, though? He becomes a seamstress or a seamster. I don't know if that's a word, but or a tailor. I guess that's what you would call him. The male versions. And what does he do?
Clothe them.
There you go. What does he make the clothes out of? Well, there's a good lot of you on working on this, working on number 1. Of skin. There you go. Animal skin. Something had to die in order for the humans to be covered, because at this point they're naked and ashamed. They try to cover themselves up with fig leaves. What does God do? He replaces those fig leaves with animal skins. And I'll talk about why that's really important, because here we have Yahweh's response, not just of judgment, but also of grace as well here. And you're going to see that be pretty consistent down the line. All right, question number 2. Those of you that had question number 2, how was sin described in Genesis 4? How is sin being described in Genesis 4?
It's described as like lurking and crouching at your door, and it desires to have you and take you over.
Good, good. It possesses all these animated qualities, even despite the fact that right now it's just kind of like this ambiguous blob of just kind of out there ambiguity. Sin is just kind of out there somewhere. So what is Cain's specific sin?
We came up with a group as for Cain's specific sins to be covetousness and also murder.
Good, good. But who instigates Cain's response?
The Lord.
Yeah, ain't that something? Ain't that something? The Lord kind of pokes at Cain and says, like, what's going on? Why are you so mad? Why is your face so down? What is it? Yes, his face so downcast or turned in. And what is Yahweh's response to Cain? Because as we know, Cain kills Abel. And what is Yahweh's response to Cain? There's a couple things going on.
So he first questions Cain, like
Yep.
asking him what he did, and Cain lied. And then
Yep.
so because of that, God decides to curse him
Mhm.
and also places a mark on him, which wouldn't allow anyone to kill Cain because he wanted he feared that.
Yep.
But God kind of protected him in a way
Yep.
with the mark. So
Yep.
yeah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Good job. And that's, you have, again, this coinciding theme that's going to come up all over Genesis, where you have judgment and mercy being demonstrated. That they're not two different things going on, but the way that they'll start to come together on being two sides of the same coin, depending on where an individual stands. And so again, judgment and mercy that are going to be placed together already here in Genesis 3 and 4. All right, those of you that had question number 3, talk to me. What's happened to creation and to humanity as well?
It's become so corrupt that they're implied to have had intercourse with, and not angelic, but spiritual beings.
Yeah, these
And it's
Nephilim characters.
It's to the point where God is so disgusted that he's limiting their lifespan.
Yeah, good, excellent. So then Yahweh's response to that limitation on life, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Good. So as we start to unpack some of these things, you guys nailed so many of the big parts, but there is a few things that I want to go back over. That usually what this is designated as, this portion of Genesis 3, and then some of even going through chapter 6. And we talk about this in Biblit some, but it's, we usually dub this the fall of man, the fall of humanity, the fall of whatever we want to call it. But it's not as though humans no longer have, especially Adam and Eve, no longer have a relationship with God, that they're kind of fallen. They're going to be replaced by these other human beings. Let's go ahead and get James and Jane in here and they'll take over. No, but rather that what happens that there's a kind of loss of this place between God and humanity that happens because of sin, a kind of distortion, a separation within the relationship, that there's a little bit of a break in the relationship. And that there's a kind of originating sin that leads to rebellion. And I prefer the word rebellion. You could use disobedience as well. I just use the word rebellion to stay consistent with some of the keen monarchy language that is being used in Genesis chapter 1, where Yahweh is the king who's sitting on his throne. And you have these representatives, these vice regents or royals that are under his care, under his rule. That Yahweh is working alongside and working with in order to help them to fulfill their vocation or calling and being responsible to care for one another. And so again, that the use of the term rebellion, I prefer to use. But where this comes from is autonomy. Autonomy. That this desire to self-rule that is tied together again between being able to make one's own calls, again, that this ability to be like God and to say what is good and what is evil, those two things are tied together. That the ability to be like God and to designate what's good and what's evil is part of what it means to be like God. And at least in Genesis 3, that is that's the connection. That we get to decide for ourselves, that we as creatures make the designation of what's good and what's evil, not God. And again, that will become the issue over and over and over again of autonomy. Autonomy. And that we have what's this kind of opponent in the garden. And some of you guys had made note of it in your homework, that it's, and Baker had brought it up last week, that not sure if it's Satan, if it's the devil or evil, and that while we'll just take Genesis at face value and reading through the narrative, that there is this kind of opposition or opponent both to God and to humanity that's present there in the garden. And so you'll note there that when the serpent does approach the humans, that Eve isn't alone, that Adam is there. He's just silent. And this is an important part to bring up because, again, it's usually pinned on the woman that it's Eve's fault that we're all this way, and how foolish. And again, this is just the general, one of the generalities and one of the stereotypes that's nasty, but still exists, is that now women can be trusted to make decisions because of what Eve had done. And again, this is a really bad reading of Genesis 3. But again, it's very, very common. Especially when we start importing Paul and what he has to say about women speaking in church. But the issue with that is, again, one, that Eve isn't alone. That's important to bring up because the plural you there in Genesis 3, it's in the form of you, but it's better rendered y'all. Did God really say to you, did God really say to y'all that y'all should not eat from the tree? And so again, both of them are there. And even Eve says we. There's, so again, Adam's there. But in as much as it might be a failure of Eve to cooperate, more than that, it's a failure of Adam to pass along the commandment he's been given in chapter 2. Because again, God gives Adam the command, and it seems as though Adam, who knows what he ought not to be doing, doesn't pass that along to Eve, or doesn't speak up in order to ensure that, hey, we're not supposed to do this. And so again, the responsibility falls back on Adam, not because he's the male, but because he's the one that God had told not to do what they end up doing, which is to eat from the tree. And it's because of this disobedience that disorder starts getting invited back into creation. And we'll talk about why that is here in a minute with sin. But one of the questions that does come up from this specific passage is, can God be trusted to look out for the humans' good? Because it seems as though that there's this kind of mistrust by humans in God because God is withholding something. Why can't I know what's good and evil? Why can't I make the decisions for myself? I'm a grown man, I'm a grown woman. We've learned, we become learned creatures. That is there something going on here? And do we still deal with some of this here today? God, you're withholding something. Should be farther along than I am right now. I'm gonna open up for discussion with this. Do we still deal with some of this stuff today?
Yes.
How so? Talk to me about it.
Well, we deal with sin all the time.
Mm-hmm. Let me go put this back up real quick. Go ahead. Go deal with it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm specifically talking about.
And
Go ahead.
it seems in our very nature to distrust God.
Yeah.
Weird
and
as
what do
that
you think
might
is?
sound.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in today's environment,
Yeah.
autonomy is made to look really attractive.
Yeah.
Like, especially since mankind has free will. So
Mhm.
there's always going to be that, there's always been that desire for autonomy in us.
Yeah.
Because some people would say, now I don't necessarily agree with this, but some people would say if we can't make our own decisions, then how can we have free will?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the paradoxical things is that the idea that if we are able to make our own decisions, thus we are free, um, without necessarily having the knowledge, complete knowledge about the kind of decisions that we're making. And so, um, it'd be akin to, like, again, a kid doesn't like the way things are going at home. I'm sure a lot of us have done this. I don't know if you guys did this when you were kids. I did this. I forget what had happened at the house, but I decided I'm going to pack up all my stuff and run away. I was maybe like 6 or 7 years old. Like, yeah, I'll find a way to make it. I remember I threw a blanket, a shirt, and I think some underwear in my little backpack. But my backpack was probably about this big. I'm thinking, like, man, I can do this on my own. I'll figure it out. Anybody else do that? Or was it just me, my little bratty self? Just needed to. Or was I just, was I the only dramatic 6-year-old that tried to run away? Oh, you guys, there's a few of you that tried it. And so again, it's just one of those things where I only did that multiple times. Like, where are we gonna go? Like, you little kid, you did it all the time. Oh man, we'll talk about that later. But it's just, again, it's this idea that we know better, so I ought to make my own decisions, and it's very difficult, especially as an adult, to be able to say that I really don't have a lot of control over my own life. But brothers and sisters, I'll tell you guys the good news is that oftentimes that is exactly what it means to be Christian, is that when your life really doesn't make sense apart from God's own hand and Jesus, specifically Jesus' own presence in your life. That our lives don't really make sense apart from Jesus. And Maddie, you got your hand up?
I was just gonna say, I feel like as an adult, like as a kid, I didn't know to trust God
Mhm.
because like as a kid, you just think you know what's best, kind of in that way of like, oh, I'm gonna run
Yeah.
away, I can do this on my own. But as an adult, I feel like it almost like the distrust shifts from like just not knowing, but to being fearful of the trauma that you kind of already have of like
Yeah.
bad things happening. Or certain dreams or wishes not coming true. And I feel like it's kind of the like, why do bad things happen to good people? I feel like that's where like, thank you. That's where that like enters the conversation. And
Yeah,
like
definitely.
as adults, it makes it even harder to trust God because we have like I think we like to call it like intellect, but really it's just like fear and trauma. But
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then that's another whole other issue that gets brought into the conversation, because again, it's not just about what we know, but it's also about what we've experienced that either keeps us from throwing ourselves full-fledged into saying, we just, not only do we say it, but we also live it. Especially if there was a need that you had as a child that wasn't met. Whether you experience abuse, abandonment, you experience a lot of instability, you experience some kind of absence from a parent. Yeah, that your parents are married and they were there, but your dad or mom kind of checked out. Or again, that there was a lot of pressure put on you that if you don't do this one thing, then you were treated differently or you felt less loved. And that's at least how you interpret it as a child. And so again, that all these different things that shape the way that we trust God, that I at least again want to ask the question is, are these kinds of ideas about our own self-control and what we do with that desire to want to control? And how do we go about relinquishing some of that control in order to allow God to kind of steer and direct us? Because I can tell y'all from my 33 years on this ball of dirt, it doesn't get any easier. Some things do, but other things, after I thought I was pretty good at trusting Jesus. I was single for like 10 years, and so was just working. Bills were minimal. Just going to school, working, doing that, living that life. And then once I had gotten married, I had told my wife, because one of the big struggles that I had, especially as a male, a Hispanic male, was the desire to want to provide. To provide, which again, it's in all of us, but especially again ingrained in me since the day I was born. My grandpa, make sure you're always working, make sure you're working, make sure you're working, make sure you're taking care of your family. Again, a very, very good thing. But what it ended up turning into was something similar what's happening in Genesis 3 there with Adam, that by the sweat of your brow you'll eat your bread. And what it means is that there's going to be a kind of anxiety that goes into our work about whether or not it's going to be enough to sustain us. Whether or not it's going to be enough to sustain us. And that's what that passage is trying to get at, is the kind of anxiety that goes into our work that's both a part of life on earth, but then also part of kind of a lot of our day-to-day existence, wondering if our work is going to be enough, not just to pay bills, but are we ourselves enough? I know that's something I struggled with a long time and still struggle with it. Being quite performance oriented, that the things I do make the kind of composite sketch of who I am, and trying to find some relief from that. But again, part of this, and as it's been brought up, and Joshua brought this up, it's kind of part of what it means to be a human creature, which is to be limited. And we are creatures that desire, especially in America. Don't you tell me a dang thing. The worst thing you can tell an American is no. As kids, you can't tell no kid no. That's the first thing they learn. First word most kids learn. No, no, no. There's this video my wife had sent me like 2 or 3 days ago on Instagram. There's a little dog to learn how to say no. It sounds just like the dog's just barking, but it sounds like the lady's telling her, a little tiny dog. I think it was like a small terrier. Go to bed. No. Go to bed. No. It sounds like this dog is saying no, but again, it's all over the place. This desire, again, this unwillingness to want to not just not cooperate, but this desire for control and to call our own shots. That it's within all of us, and so hard it is that of being able to relinquish control in order for God to really be in control of our lives and for Jesus to be Lord. And so if that's where you're at today, again, part of it is the beauty of recognizing like, hey, most of us are here, like in this very specific area. And especially, again, this desire to want to have control, that it's within us. It's within us. At the same time, learning what does it mean to relinquish control in so many areas. And that's what discipleship is all about. What discipleship is all about. Is being able to be more like Jesus, the one, again, who submits himself to the Father's will. And that we have a model in Jesus of a person, in Jesus of all people, who doesn't always get what he wants. And that's what you see on the cross. And so I won't go too much into it, but that's what you have. Genesis 4. And so the story begins positive, again, with Cain and Abel. You have these two brothers out in the fields. They'll do their work. Again, men of the earth. And what happens is that God makes it clear that Cain can master his sin, but still Cain chooses to kill. Again, it's not here that there's a general, well, the devil made me do it. Oh, I'm just a sinful human being, so of course he did that. No, that Cain very much bears the responsibility for his actions. And that you have sin that comes in here, and that what we call it is anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic, and what that is taken to mean is anthropos, meaning human, morphic, which is to change or transform, that this non-human entity takes on human characteristics. You have that this sin is enticing. It's trying to draw Cain in. It has this possessive-like character that can overtake Cain. But Cain has to exercise mastery over it, again, by saying no. And the essence of part of the dispute between the two is that what Abel offers is the firstborn, and what Cain gives is the fat. And the way that's depicted, again, is that Abel gives the best, again, with the firstborn, and Cain gives whatever he's got, an offering. But again, there exists the possibility for Cain to be able to exercise, kind of turning things around, saying no to sin, and then enacting on the good. But Cain chooses not to and ends up killing his brother. And we see in Genesis 3 how sin works its way from this married couple down to the children, now affecting the most basic of human relationships, which is family units. And it's important to see here again the ways in which it's working against these humans, because what we're going to start to see in Genesis 6 is it's now spread out through the rest of the world. What began in a family unit is now spread globally. That Eden, that kind of picturesque model, not perfect, but beautiful and called good by God, it's been wrecked. And now Yahweh's world has turned against him. And now Yahweh feels a certain way about where creation has gone. And what the text says is that Yahweh is sorry. He's grieved to the heart. And what that is means in Hebrew is that he's literally heartbroken. He's heartbroken about what has happened to creation, to the earth, to humanity. And the one sin that is named from Genesis 1 through 6, it's not, again, the one that is specifically named is violence. Dehumanizing violence that has now filled the earth. And so Yahweh is personally affected by what these creatures are doing. And this kind of demonstration that Yahweh has concern about what happens on the earth and when injustice and evil prevails. So God himself is personally affected by the sin that has traveled, again, from this rebellion in chapter 3, and now all the way kind of exploding on a global scale in chapter 6. And so there are some consequences, and we do need to highlight some of these because, again, this is one of the things that Yahweh will work to address, is that what you have is a sin as disobedience or rebellion. And there's layers to it, which we'll talk about when we get to Leviticus. But that generally speaking, as disobedience or rebellion, what it does three things. But from these three things, what it's doing is inviting chaos back into created order. It's disordering what God is rightly ordered. And again, these three things that get changed by sin are relationships with God, relationships between human beings, and then relationships with the rest of creation and nature, namely and specifically the land. The land. That it's these things that Yahweh has ordered relationship between humanity and himself, ordered relationships between human beings with one another. And again, we see these two things happening with Genesis 1 and 2. And the relationships with creation and nature, especially the land, that the humans are called to work and till the land, care for the land. But that's the thing, again, you have, really quickly, you have the phrase that Cain uses, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? That rhetorical question, the language that uses keeper, it's the same word used when God tells Adam to work and keep the land. That what Adam was supposed to do with the earth, Abel has a question about what is he supposed to do with his brother. To care for, to be responsible for his brother, to care for, to be responsible for the earth. And again, to shirk the responsibility of caring for one another is ultimately to shirk the responsibility of what we have to be made in God's image. And so we didn't get a chance to get through everything going on with the flood narratives, which is fine. We'll get to it on Thursday. But are there any questions? Any questions before we go for this morning? Any questions?
Can I talk to you privately after class, Professor?
Of course, of course. All right. Are there any questions? All right. Well, if there are no questions, either wait a few minutes and we'll talk and figure it out. But you guys have an excellent Tuesday. Have an excellent Tuesday. Get some tacos. I always say that every Tuesday. I'm going to keep saying it for the next 14 weeks. But all right. See you guys. You guys have an excellent, excellent, beautiful Tuesday. Yeah.
Thank you so much.